Thanks for staying with us, everyone. Tonight on Beyond the Headlines, West Africa is once again a turning point. President Tinubu has just handed over the leadership of ECOWAS to Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada, ending a tenure filled with challenges, military coups, regional unrest, and growing distrust within the bloc. But even before the dust settles, the big questions are already on the table. Can ECOWAS still lead without Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger in the fold? Can Maada win back confidence and push back the rising tide of authoritarianism, especially now that France is stepping back and Russia's influence is growing across the Sahel? Here at home, Nigeria isn't just watching from the sidelines. We're battling our own crisis. Just this past weekend, a suicide bomber struck in Borno, killing at least 12 people. In Kano, a deadly explosion went off at a steel company, killing 5 and injuring several others. And in Plateau State, 12 wedding guests were brutally lynched, an attack President Tinubu has strongly condemned as barbaric and unacceptable. So what does this ECOWAS handover really mean for Nigeria? Can we lead a region in crisis while struggling to hold our own ground? To unpack all of this, I'm joined by someone who's been right at the heart of international peace efforts, Dr. Patrick Coker, as former spokesman for the United Nations mission in Sierra Leone and a seasoned expert in conflict and diplomacy. He joins us now on Beyond the Headlines. Dr. Coker, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you very much.
You've worked in the heart of post-war recovery efforts in Sierra Leone. What do you make of this leadership handover from Nigeria to President Maada? Is this just a routine rotation, or does it signal something deeper about where the region is actually headed?
Thank you again, and thank you to viewers. I must say this is another step to deepen regional democracy, as it were. Statutorily, the leadership is rotational, and we have seen a smooth transition, especially to a president that was a military leader, handed over power, and came back democratically to lead Sierra Leone. That's number one. Number two is seasoned, especially when he has spent his first term in office, won an election, and indeed, he was also an experienced peacekeeper, especially when he was in the military. So we're going to be witnessing an ECOWAS leader that has those elements of keeping sub-regional peace.
Interesting way you have put it, because there are quite a number of questions as to the qualities President Bio needs most to command credibility in this deeply fractured regional bloc. It is not unusual that military leaders in the past return with what we call agbada in Nigeria under a more democratic setting. And I'm sure you're also aware that democracy as it were is now being threatened in the West African region, given what we said with those 3 other countries. What do you think they must do differently? I'm talking about the regional leadership, the bloc's leadership.
I must say that we've witnessed a period of less coups in the sub-region. Of course, there had been these triggers, especially from 4 countries, as it were. Guinea, even though Guinea is quite quiet and is taking in the sanction without much, troubles. But definitely, I hope that Guinea will also re-emerge, transition into a democracy. However, we have also witnessed a pattern, especially with the 3 countries that departed from ECOWAS. We will not condemn them for leaving, because it is their right to be a member of any international organization. However, that does not remove the fact that coups these days don't really, they are not fashionable, and they don't meet up the will of majority of the people. They got it through the barrel of the gun. Having said that, I believe that the sub-regional leaders are making frantic efforts to still interact and relate with these three countries. Does that stop nations from interacting and relating? No, we're still in this sub-region, and the reason ECOWAS came about was about economy. And even in the EU, it was economy that brought them together based on coal in those very early years. And I believe in time to come, these military leaders who also want to participate in civil democracy and democratic practices that will make them more relevant with their colleagues. And they will transition and probably come back to ECOWAS. There are serious issues in ECOWAS that need to be dealt with. We have weak institutions. We still have very unharmonized energy system in the sub-region. Trade and other economic activities are still very challenging. It will surprise you that air travels from Liberia to any part of the country, you have to travel from another country. Probably you have to travel to Togo, Cote d'Ivoire before you go anywhere. So even the airline sector is still very, very hampered. So all these are issues that can be addressed during his tenure.
Absolutely. The narrative, although is slightly different from these three, especially in Burkina Faso, referring to the idea that, democracy has come to stay and it is the norm. The feelers we're getting from Burkina Faso is like, the people really want it. It's hard to tell whether that's the case inside the country. But these three countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, are now out of ECOWAS. How big of a deal is that? Can the regional bloc still speak with one voice? Or are we now looking at the divided West Africa for the foreseeable future? You seem quite optimistic about it, but do you think ECOWAS is doing enough to engage this military-led government, or the door has completely been shut?
I believe there are diplomatic efforts behind the scenes that are being engaged. For example, I have witnessed the president of Ghana interacting and relating with the AAS countries. That's the Alliance for the Sahel states. And I believe that the president of Sierra Leone, who is now the ECOWAS chief, will also make such endeavors or efforts to bring them on board. However, as we speak, these three countries are the most devastated when it comes to terrorism. It will amaze you that the terrorists have bases within the country. They control swaths of territories and run their administration like a normal state. So they are really, really going through serious challenges. And I believe that this could definitely, I won't say it justifies taking over power, but this could, at some level, speak for the need to really engage these terrorists seriously. However, I am of the opinion that in time to come, like all military regimes, the civilians will get tired of them and do the needful. Civil society will rise up and they show them the door. And when that happens, they will be so unpopular, like most of the militaries in the sub-region, and get a civilian regime in place. And I believe then those civilian regimes will want to engage their partners or their colleagues in the sub-region.
It also brings to mind the question of whether or not the other countries in the sub-region are paying attention and learning the lessons. You know, you talked about the issue of terrorism and how challenging certain issues, even the economy, can begin to make this alternative appealing to the public. But there are concerns this deepening divide could lead to a long-term split within the region. We've seen France pull back and Russia now, in a way, stepping into the picture. Is Russia really filling that gap, or are some of these countries just drifting into uncertainty? What kind of ripple effect could this have for countries like ours?
Well, I want to believe that the activities of Russia in the sub-region or in Africa per se is an extension of global politics. And you agree with me that the exit of France, and indeed, in quotes, the West, from the Sahel, including the UN, I must say, that means, I mean, peacekeeping mission. It shows that these countries need some level of support from major powers. This is quite traditional and expected. However, Russia does not have a history of, for lack of a better word, colonization. So their presence on the ground could be challenged by language, and a history of not having the experience of managing such relationships. And for example, I hear or I've read that some of the Russian presence are being reduced in some of these AAS countries. From that perspective, you agree with me that it's just a matter of time. There will be need for interaction and relationship with countries that will probably come and be on the ground and who have experience. However, does not mean that they are likely to go back to where they're coming from, meaning their former colonial master. Former colonial rulers. I believe that Russia will support them to the extent that they also have benefits from this relationship.
You've worked in conflict communication, Dr. Coker. How should ECOWAS prepare for new threats like foreign influence, propaganda, armed proxies, especially in a region as fragile as the Sahel?
I must say that, like any organization, being proactive when it comes to media is the solution. While I was in Liberia, of course, as spokesperson and indeed political affairs officer, I supported the transition of the UN radio in Liberia to ECOWAS. But I must tell you today that the impact of that radio station, which can cover the whole of, probably the whole of West Africa, has not been felt. I would have expected And this transition came about under Ambassador Ajisomo, who was the ECOWAS boss in Liberia. He did a yeoman's job, beautiful, very brilliant job, to have been able to get that radio station. Now, most of African countries citizens listen to radio. It's still the traditional means of getting information out to majority of the citizens. That radio station should be enhanced. Aside, we have new means of communication, of reaching out to the public these days. Social media is there, and there's need to also engage these tools in disseminating information. Real-time information is what works today.
Indeed.
And I would really recommend that with a very vibrant media, definitely ECOWAS will reach out to, with its policies, such that when there is any decision, such decision is sent to member states, and this is disseminated to their citizens.
Let us bring this back home. Nigeria is battling its own internal threats, terror attacks, border insecurity. I'm sure you're following communal killings in the North Central. Can we still afford to lead a regional peace and security agenda, or should we just focus inward right now?
Well, I must say that the position of Nigeria is quite strategic for very obvious reasons, and we must step up. First, this is the largest Black African nation in the world. Two, if you look at the history of Nigeria, we have played very significant roles in leadership role in supporting African nations, either in gaining their independence or indeed restoring democracy or supporting or deepening. We have the institutions. We have the capacity. Of course, there are issues. So I must say that the challenges we have in the Northeast, aside from the fact that it has become a really sore point in our security architecture, it is possible to deal with them. We have trained officers. I was privileged to be a trainer of officers in the Nigerian Defense Academy. And those officers are well trained. We need equipment. There need to be that political will. For example, elsewhere, citizens are trained to support the military activities. They will give you information. But where citizens also are participating in what happens on the ground, then there is a problem. There are a lot of perspective to it. The other thing is the fact that, do we have the number of troops to hold grounds and overwhelm the terrorists? How, you ask yourself, how would ragtag forces have a sway or have a control where you have trained militaries? The other thing is, of course, this has been discussed, where you have unseen hands supporting these terrorists. They don't make weapons, they buy them from somewhere. Indeed. In fact, they say Boko Haram, and they go against education. Let me not say Western education, but they make use of drones, they buy weapons, and they even operate them. When they seize weapons from some locations, they know how to operate them. You wonder who is giving them that kind of technical support to do those activities. So I think we need a robust team to look deeply into these issues, resolve them. And as a nation, we must agree that we need peace to really progress and develop from where we are.
We're really counting on that and the kind of cooperation that will now exist within the sub-regional bloc. President Maada has promised to reform the region's security systems, things like better intelligence sharing and faster response time. We hope that they will be able to match words with action and that the things that need to be done will be done to make that promise real. But that's our time, Dr. Coker. It's been an interesting conversation with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Patrick Coker is former spokesman for the United Nations mission in Sierra Leone and a seasoned expert in conflict and diplomacy. Glad to have you join us.
Thank you very much.
And that's our show today, everyone. Thank you for being a part of it. You can